Yes, it's as always, it's so lovely to be here with you. I have many questions tonight, but of course, if you have a question, please bring it up live in the chat, or if you're on Zoom, I'd love to speak with you. Let's see if I have any announcements myself. Just first is a big thank you to everyone continuing to offer support and donations for this program. Those are deeply appreciated. Beyond that, I'm still holding the brakes or pressing the brakes on scheduling a fall retreat myself. I just want to give it a couple more weeks and see how things play out with this fun that we're having with the virus. So today in Colorado, they started to release restrictions. We can now all go get tattooed in Colorado if that was something you're interested in. I'm always surprised at the things that are on the list of what they allow us to do now, but I can say this. Yesterday, I did a little bit of a road trip with my daughter. We drove over to Ridgeway, Colorado, which is over by Telluride. We had to go over a number of really big mountain passes, Coal Bank Pass and Red Mountain Pass, to name a couple. And up there in those heights, there's still 2, 3, 4 feet of snow covering most of the mountains and on the side of the road there. And I was just having a wonderful, peaceful morning with my daughter going on this drive. And we came around a corner, and all of a sudden in the road there were two giant bighorn sheep. And the beautiful thing about when you see big game animals in Colorado, especially something like a bighorn sheep, which is quite rare to see. Something, a deer, I can see a deer every day, and I've seen so many bear that I've lost count. But a bighorn sheep I've only seen a couple times in my life. And the beautiful thing about when you see an animal, that you've never seen before, or that, you see once a decade, is your mind goes blank when you're looking at these creatures. And you see the absolute beauty, the absolute majesty of them. I didn't even know what to name this animal. I was looking at it, and there was two of them. They were bigger than a deer and almost as big as an elk, if you can believe that. An elk is, almost as big as a horse. And they had new horns on their head, and their fur looked like they were getting new white fur because we're coming out of winter and going into spring. And they looked like creatures from, something you'd see on Star Wars, on the planet Tatooine, or however you say that one, where Luke Skywalker's from. And I was just in such awe. In fact, I almost wrecked my van staring at these creatures because they were so beautiful, so majestic. And I loved it. And I looked to my daughter and I said, "What is this? Is that a mountain goat?" And she said, "Oh no, Dad. The mountain goats are different. Those are the bighorn sheep." And then for a moment, my mind went fuzzy again because I said, "Oh, I didn't know that there was a difference between a mountain goat and a sheep. I would have called it the same thing." Children can be in this state of just total innocence before they know the name of an object. The first time you see a bald eagle and you see it, it takes your breath away. The first time you see a big cat like a mountain lion, or a lynx or a bobcat, again, which I've seen. And the lynx and the bobcat, also I had a similar experience with, where I didn't know the difference between the two. And so my mind could not put a label on it quickly. And so I was able to see the lynx and to see the bobcat without a label. And what I'm getting at here is there's a great freedom, a great wonder and state of awe that we live in when we don't have a label for a thing, when we're seeing something for the first time. In fact, more and more, as we live in the present moment, what we find is we live without labels, without assigning meaning to something. And what happens to our perception is it becomes very wide, incredibly vast, and at the same time it becomes childlike and innocent. And you see wonder and beauty, just everywhere, everywhere. One of the great paradoxical things about when we live in this state is that even things that we've seen every day start to come alive. They start to sparkle and twinkle with light. They become luminous and radiant. And this time, with the coronavirus, because we've had so many restrictions and because our world has been turned so upside down, we all started to develop the habit of staying inside for 6 weeks or whatever people were supposed to do. Fortunately, in Colorado, you don't have to stay indoors. But I literally hadn't been to the supermarket in 6 weeks, and I went yesterday just on a whim. I was driving by, and I saw the market was fairly empty. So I pulled in there, and it was just interesting to see other fellow human beings coming up to me, speaking to me, saying hi, smiling through their masks, walking through the store and just feeling the radiance of the store, the innocence of this moment. And so I encourage you, as the restrictions begin to become lifted in your state or country, to see if you can not just go back to your old habitual way of being, but rather to have every experience new and fresh and alive, as you interact with your life again. The problem with everyday life is we tend to say, I know what this is, and then we stop living. We just repeat the past over and over again. The Buddha called this the Wheel of Samsara. We go into a trance state. But the great challenge for us as the restrictions are lifted is, could you come out into the world new and fresh and alive? And this experience that I had with the, I'd like to call it the mountain goat, but it was the bighorn sheep that I saw the other day, was a reminder of this. Just a great reminder of the freshness of life, the mystery of life. When you see a creature come out of the woods that you've never seen before. Let all of life wake you up. When you see the trees blowing in the wind and all the flowers coming up. Of course, if you live in the land down under, if the leaves are starting to turn red and yellow and brown, let fall wake you up. Here in the northern hemisphere, let spring wake you up. Wake you up. And so anyways, I've got a lot of questions, and I thought I'd start with one from Lynn. She sent me a card, and because I hadn't been to my office, my in-town office in so many weeks, I'm just getting it now. So Lynn, I do apologize for the delay. She writes, Craig, I've been working on trusting that the truth is true. Yes. And I come from a strong Catholic background. It is hard for me to let go of some beliefs. Any words of encouragement would be welcome. Love, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn, for the great question and the donation. Lynn, one of the things that I've done for the entirety of my life is I've just had this basic teaching, I think a basic realization that I came into this lifetime with, was to take the good of any experience and to leave the bad behind, to leave the confusing behind, to leave the complicated behind, the overly complicated, overly complex. And, I'll give an example of this. So my little girl, she goes to Catholic school. And when I say the word Catholic, I don't think about the church. I don't think about the Pope and all the popes and the bishops and all the scandals and the guilt and the shame and all that nonsense. To me, that has nothing to do with Christ, nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus. I can say this: most of the Bible makes no sense to me. No sense at all. But I'll give a fun example from my morning today. I was out actually changing the oil on my Jeep, and my daughter came out and she said, she was hollering at me. She's always hollering at me, my little girl. And she said, "Dad, maps on. And she just kept saying it. I just said, like, what is maps? I don't know what you're talking about. And after a couple minutes, I came inside to see what she was doing. And she was telling me Mass is on, like Catholic Mass. So at the school she goes to, they broadcast Mass on YouTube now because we're not supposed to go to church anymore because of the virus. And so I went in, and the priest was telling a wonderful story about Jesus. And then the story got a little bit confusing, as sometimes the Bible does. And so I just listened with an open heart. I felt the innocence of the story, the part that made sense. I allowed that innocence to light up my heart. I didn't even allow it, it just happened. It just lit up my heart. And then anytime the priest starts rambling, like maybe I do sometimes, I just let it fly over my head. And so after he told the story, from the Bible, I took the part that was good, and the rest of the stuff, I just let it pass on by. I didn't hold on to it. I didn't attach to it. I just let it flow over me. And then he started saying the Apostles' Creed, which goes something like, we believe in one God, the Lord, the giver of light. We believe in Jesus Christ, only Son. And it says a lot of silly stuff, like the only Son of God. And so I know full well that Jesus is the Son of God. I also know that we are all the sons and daughters and children of God. And so that word only, I don't let it bother me. I don't let my chakras contract. I don't buy into it. Anything that my heart tells me is not true, I let it float over my head and say, I'm not going to be concerned with this. And so, paradoxically, about the Catholic faith is, I just read this year from Richard Rohr. He said the word Catholic means universal. The way we've taken it to mean now is to mean that it's these core set of beliefs, that is different than Presbyterian or Episcopal or Lutheran or Muslim or whatever, but universal. With the word universal, there's an innate sense of openness. And on the path of truth, to go back to what you're saying, I'm working on trusting that the truth is true. What the truth will do for you, Lynn, is it will open your heart. It will make your heart smile. And so if we come from a strong Catholic background, I want you to imagine if you sat in a room with Jesus, if you become in contact with the Christ, which is everywhere and in everything, that's the truth. It makes your heart smile. It makes your heart melt in a sense of innocence. When you say strong Catholic beliefs, to me that sounds like a hell realm. Strong Catholic beliefs. There's so much guilt and shame and all that nonsense in the church, and all the politics and the rituals. The rituals are meant to open your heart and actually connect you to the 7 chakra centers. There's 7 sacraments. Each are connected to the 7 chakras. And they're all meant to open your heart, open you to the direct experience of this moment. And so this word belief, we want to let go of all of our beliefs about Catholicism, the Catholic Church, the Pope. Even though my belief now is that the Pope we have now is pretty good. He's a pretty good guy. He loves the planet. He's trying to help the poor. And he believes in science and evolution. And anyways, but there's so many faulty beliefs. And so we want to stay with the truth. And the way you know you're in the truth is it makes your heart smile. It makes you feel a yes inside. A yes. And so follow that. So I don't want this process of letting go, the strong Catholic beliefs in the background, to be like a lot of work. I want you to imagine whenever we let go of beliefs, it should be like if you've ever been on a really long hike and your backpack is real heavy and you're so happy at the end of the hike just to throw that pack on the ground and just throw it in the dirt and just lay down in the grass and say, okay, I'm done hiking. I'm done carrying this weight. If you weren't a big hiker, you can imagine just being on a long journey, carrying your luggage all over the world, lifting that heavy suitcase, and then just putting it down and saying, oh, I just want to melt. I just want to melt right here, right now. And so, boy, that's a great question, Lennon. Thank you so much for sharing. It always amazes me how much baggage people pick up from religion. Fortunately, I just never did that too much. One thing I did do, paradoxically, I guess which has to do with religion, is I did come into this lifetime with a strong monk archetype. So I had this real serious thing about celibacy when I first got on the path, and poverty consciousness. It took me a long time to get over those two. But everything else, whatever the grumpy old man priest on the stage, is how I call it, was saying, I just let it fly over my head if it didn't make sense. If it didn't light up my heart, I look at it the same as like listening to cable news. It's just a bunch of people squawking at each other, yelling about nothing. So anyways, thank you, Lynn. Great question. Okay, so let's see here. Here's a question. Let's see here. Hi, Craig. I have a question about skillful means and a strong backbone. What do you do when you see a parent being abusive, verbally or emotionally or physically, to their child out in public? What about a grocery store clerk who is rude and condescending to you? What about someone who is disrespectful to you, to your family or friends when you are in town with them? What about a family member who tells racist jokes at holiday dinners? Boy, these are all great examples. It doesn't feel good to me not to intervene. In fact, it feels like disrespect to the self, like a subtle violence to one's spirit. It also doesn't feel good just to go close down to the world and not let anyone in. Yet I have found myself nearly physically assaulted time and time again, recently and in the past, as I have chosen to intervene. Give any examples from your life when you did choose to act, and any other thoughts. Thanks, Craig. Yeah, boy, this is such a great question. And so the big answer that I'm going to give is I don't have like a blanket reply for what I do when I see, say, child abuse in public. What I do is I feel into my heart intuitively as to if and how I shall respond. Now, the how is just as important as if. Once upon a time, when I was a young college student, I studied this thing called communication. And I didn't even know what it was that I was studying, but I said communication. I thought it meant that you were going to be in TV and radio, but one of the things that I learned in the psychology of communication is when we're going to speak to someone, our communication will not be effective unless the person is willing and able to hear us. Willing and able to hear us. So if I see someone at the park and they are, smacking their kid, they are not going to be willing and or able to hear me. In fact, if I do go up to them and tell them, hey, knock it off, there's a child there. That's no way to treat your kid. There's a good chance that they might stop beating their kid, to use that as a terrible example. But then later, there's also a great chance that they'll beat their kid even more fully. Because what will happen is they will feel shamed by me. They'll feel ashamed of their behavior, and they know they need to knock it off. But then when they're alone, there's a good chance that they'll hit that kid even harder. Oftentimes saying something like, see what you made me do. And again, because I have a background in psychology, I've actually worked with a lot of kids. And I was a high school teacher for a minute. And, if I was a teacher and I shamed a parent, like at a parent-teacher conference, I knew that they would go home and, they'd take it out on the child. And so I had to learn ways to speak to a parent compassionately, to help them de-escalate. And I can't tell you how to do that because I'm not there in the moment, and each example is going to be so radically different. There'll be times when I might just go stand by the parent in a loving way, not in a judgmental way, not giving them the what my daughter calls the stink eye, so not giving them the evil eye, but just going and standing next to them, or by them or in their proximity. Most adults will stop beating their child if you, if you're in the supermarket and you go up and grab a can of soup right next to them. Sometimes I've walked by at the, a little bit of a smile and said, hey, is everything all right here? You guys got this under control? I'm good at telling jokes sometimes to de-escalate things. So I've worked with that. But you have to be real careful. If you tell someone they're doing a bad job parenting, more often than not, it will backfire. One of the things I encourage you to do, Wes, is you gave basically two options: shut down or speak up. And when you ask the heart, we're coming into what I call the third option. The dualistic mind always sees things as I can do this or I can do that. And whenever our question has two examples of I can do this or I can do that, I can speak up or shut down, oftentimes we're missing, what our heart would do. Sometimes you just silently witness what happens, and you smile at the kid. You smile at the kid. Sometimes you smile at the parent. Sometimes you smile at both of them, knowing that they're both having a hard day. Another thing that I can point out is whenever we have a question about, what someone else is doing, how I should respond to what someone else is doing, my teacher used to turn this around on me. And he'd say, Craig, what does this question have to do with you? So I, for example, when I was facing a lot of the things that, Wes, that you're bringing up here about, like people attacking me or having to speak up and all this kind of thing, I'll see if I can say that more clearly. Oftentimes there's a stage on the path where we come face to face with verbal assaults from outward people. We're being verbally criticized. We're in real uncomfortable situations. And God is teaching us how to get our voice. And so sometimes it's all about you getting your voice. And in order to get your voice, oftentimes we have to get in touch with our ego. And when you get in touch with your ego, it will say, I want to speak the truth. I need to speak the truth. But normally the truth that we speak in that moment is an egoic truth. I need to defend myself. This is, it's, injustice and they're being mean to me and I need to go tell them. And again, developmentally, that may be 100% appropriate for a period of time. But then developmentally, there's another step beyond that where we get in touch with the truth of our heart. And sometimes we can't get in touch with the truth of our heart right away. Sometimes we have to get in touch with the truth of our ego and let our ego scream and shout in the streets, telling everyone they're wrong for a little bit. Yelling at people in public, telling them they're not allowed to wear they need to wear masks. My friend Neil in Ireland told me that someone got on a bus in Ireland, in Dublin, I think, without a mask on. And a couple of guys grabbed the person and threw them off the bus because they didn't have a mask on. And see, these were two individuals, the ones throwing the poor guy off the bus. These were two individuals who were working on getting their voice, but they hadn't discovered skillful means yet. They could have said, something like, hey, could you please take a taxi, or could you go home and get your mask first before you get on the bus so you don't get the rest of us sick? But skillful means also means you look at yourself. You look at reality. Not everyone who doesn't have a mask on has the coronavirus and is going to be coughing all over your face and spreading it. So, sometimes skillful means we need to relax and be like the sky. So the sky is not closed and the sky is not aloof. The sky is radically accepting. One of the things that I do when I see injustice is I send the person who's the victim love. I also send the offender love. Sometimes the offender needs it more than the victim. And I also see those two individuals on a soul level. On a soul level. We've all been the victim. We've all been the offender on a soul level. I mean, we've all been a victim and an offender in this lifetime. We all have. And so compassion helps us to see that the parent who's, speaking harshly to the child, I know that any parent who speaks harshly to a child. They're stressed out, they're overwhelmed. Maybe they didn't have good parents. They certainly don't need me yelling at them and telling them to stop. They might need some support. They might need a little joke. They might need a smile. They might need me to walk by and say, gosh, being a dad is so hard. It's so hard. I mean, I can tell you this, Wes, I've said the wrong thing time and time again. I mean, I can say a funny story. I was at my daughter's birthday party once, my older daughter, so this was many years ago, maybe 14 or 15 years ago, and I was walking across the street. You know, I was at the birthday party in the park, and I'm walking back across the street to the car, you know, to go get the cake or something. And this guy was coming at me in a big truck, and we were in a residential neighborhood, and he wasn't slowing down. And I hollered something at him like, hey man, slow down. Don't hit me. You know, that's just me sharing my truth, my egoic truth, protecting my body. And he said to me, what'd you say to me? And I said, hey man, slow down. You know, you almost hit me. And he said, you got anything else you want to say? And I said, hey, just relax. I don't want you to, you know, don't get out of your truck because I don't want you to embarrass yourself in front of your child. And his child was sitting in the, you know, car next to him. And he thought I meant that I was going to beat him up and that was going to be embarrassing. Because I said, I don't want you to embarrass yourself by getting out of the truck, you know. And what I meant is I didn't want you to embarrass yourself by getting in just a heated argument with some random weirdo in the street. That was me, the weirdo. You know? And so, you know, we speak up, and a lot of times we say the wrong thing. And especially if we say, you know, I have the truth and I need to say the truth, I need to express it, oftentimes it comes out in the wrong way. Especially, you know, if we have an inner judge, an inner critic, an inner perfectionist. More often than not, we should just be quiet and let the person drive by and walk a little faster. That's what I should have done instead of, you know, almost got in a fist fight in front of my little girl at her 5th birthday party. You know, because we create karma. We can create great karma just through running our mouth. And oftentimes I'll say things and I'll just confuse people when I speak because they don't understand my sense of humor or whatever. And my wife is telling me all the time, hey, can you just don't say anything. don't say anything. And so again, like with the racist, you know, people who are telling racist jokes, the big thing I've done is just not laugh, you know, walk away. Give them the cold shoulder a little bit, just a sense of like, I don't really want to hear that. Or, hey man, will you not say that in front of the kids? You know, it's really not that funny. But again, you have to feel into it, because if a person is unwilling to hear you, if they're not able to hear you, not only is it a waste of time, there's a good chance they become more entrenched in their perspective when you argue with them. You know, it's like we have this great divide in our country right now. The Trump supporters and the liberals, it's like both are so entrenched, no one can hear each other. But what I like to do is to listen to the other person first. Listen to the other person first. This is how compassion moves. Instead of telling them what to do first, can I listen to them? Or at least listen to why they are in pain. Anyways, but you need to feel into yourself, Wes, about what's true for you. It may be true that now's the time for you to fully get your voice, and that will help you to strengthen your backbone and your Hara chakra. But again, it's important to discern what is my egoic truth, which is a developmental truth, by the way, and that needs to be expressed. But then what is also my divine truth? And what you find is when you step into the divine truth in your hara, the nature of your mind, actually starts to shift. And you no longer see injustice everywhere on planet Earth, and this desire to fix everything. As the hara greatly opens, paradoxically, instead of seeing injustice everywhere, you see suffering and confusion everywhere. But you also see that the peace is greater, the love is greater, the radiance is greater. And human beings, we need suffering. It helps us to learn, unfortunately, because we're hard-headed individuals, like the bighorn sheep, which has these giant ram horns on top of its head. We're hard-headed individuals, and so we need suffering to learn, unfortunately. And I've seen this time and time again. I could not discover the truth until I suffered enough. And boy, is that a brutal thing to say. Is that a brutal teaching? It's also a humbling teaching. But one of the things that I've discovered is on a human level, child abuse is not okay. On a divine level, suffering is okay, or else it wouldn't happen. Now, of course, there's another way, and suffering is pointing us in the direction of there's another way. There's another way to live where you're not just beating your ego against someone else's ego, where you're not fighting. And the great question is if we are in suffering, can we find this other way? If we see others in suffering, can we send them love and trust that they too have a heart and they will find another way? Even the Grinch, who had a heart that was 2 sizes too small, through his suffering, through his greediness, he found another way. He found another way. I think a little girl sent him some love, and that helped him out too. So anyways, beautiful question, Wes. Okay, I think a good friend Richard here has a question. Richard, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Hey, Craig, I'm going to ask this question, and then I'm going to qualify it just real quick.
Sure.
So the question, I'm going to ask it in a creative way. Who, what, when, where, why, how is the Divine Mother? And the reason I'm asking this question today is that you obviously have a practice where we bring Divine Mother into our fields and into our bodies. And that's a kind of intimacy that I usually share with myself, intimate partners, and food. It's a deeply, deeply intimate act, and so I'm wondering what is this force that I'm inviting to my body to help me evolve, help me awaken?
Yeah. Well, one of the words that you used right there at the end, to help me evolve. When I feel into the presence of the Divine Mother, one of the greatest experiences that I feel right away is the energy of evolution. So in the lineage of Sri Aurobindo, so often when he was speaking about the Divine Mother, he was speaking about the energy, the experience of evolution. To put that differently, it would be God in the form of evolution. Now, most people, when they think of the Divine Mother, they think of this soft, sweet, wondrous, compassionate love, which, of course, that too is the Divine Mother. But if we're inviting a descent of grace to come down into us, like we do on our Wednesday meditations, or even this moment, I feel it, it's a new force. It's an awakening force. And so it's inviting us into the present moment, and it's expanding our consciousness, upgrading our consciousness, renewing our consciousness, rejuvenating our consciousness, transforming our consciousness, healing our consciousness. And by our consciousness, in this way I'm using it, I mean our human consciousness, our humanity, and bringing our humanity into greater alignment with our divinity, which is already perfect. And so for, a couple thousand years, people have spoken about the perfection of God, like that which is unchanging. And so, of course, all of us have an absolute nature, which is unchanging, which is brilliant, which is noble, which is strong, which is vast and peaceful. But most of us don't live in that. Most of us live in confusion and chaos and suffering or division and or fear. I mean, so many of us right now are wondering, oh my gosh, I'm in so much debt because I haven't worked for 6 weeks or whatever it is. And when you invite the Divine Mother into you, it's a force of grace that realigns you into the present moment. And it aligns you always into that which is greater. That which is greater. And by greater, it's greater than any confusion you may be experiencing, greater than any suffering. It helps you to see, like say, for example, if I was the abusive parent, that, and Wes came up to me and said, hey, you're hitting your kid or you're yelling at your kid. I might not be able to receive his comment in that moment, but later that evening, if I sat down and invited the Divine Mother into me, I would feel this gentle intelligence move through me that would say something like, the guy who spoke to you in the supermarket, he was right. You need to be softer with your kids. You need to be softer with yourself. You have to be more loving. You have to work on relaxing more so you're not such a bad parent. So the voice of the Divine Mother can come in with this tender wind that just uplifts you, this tender grace. And the way I look at the spiritual path is, if we can say, Om, and just go into samadhi and be completely enlightened, that's beautiful. But for the 99.999% of the rest of us, I find it helpful to have a friend on the path. So the who, what, when, where of the Divine Mother, who, my best friend, my teacher, my partner, my silent companion, my guide, my absolute support, my very nature, the nature of all things, the nature of love, the nature of compassion, the who, all the love and the compassion of the universe. I invite that into me, because God knows us human beings, we're not all awakened Buddhas walking around blessing each other. Oftentimes, we're shooting each other, or cutting each other off in traffic, or cursing each other, or spiritually judging each other. We need help on planet Earth. We need help. And so the what, the when, the when is all the time. I'm calling upon the Divine Mother. Come into me. Show me the way. Show me a greater way to live. Whether I'm suffering through chronic pain or neurotic thoughts, or maybe I'm in the land of bliss and freedom, and I need more spaciousness or more love. The absolute goes on forever in every direction. So our experience can always grow and be improved upon. And I'm not saying that as a way that, we should always be striving for something greater. But like, for example, if you awaken to transcendent peace, not to be arrogant, but transcendent peace is very boring after a while. I want transcendent peace with bliss and love. I want the fullness of Satchidananda. So if I'm not feeling the fullness, I call upon the Divine Mother and say, hey, show me more of yourself. Show me your true face. And as I call upon more, I become more. I embody more. I grow into more. And I invite this in my life. I invite it in everyone in the Sangha's life. My aunt, I believe my aunt, who's like my second mom, my second earthly mom, to clarify that. That'd be my third mother behind the Divine Mother. She might have the coronavirus. You know, she just got really sick and she's waiting for a test to come back. She's in really bad shape. And so I invite the Divine Mother into my Aunt Kathleen's life to bless her, to hold her, to love her. Anytime any of you send me an email that says, hey, I'm suffering, basically, you know, I see your face and I hold it up before the Divine Mother and invite a blessing, invite healing. You know, like for the fella at the store who's being mean to his kid, or the mom who's being mean to the kid, I hold them both before the Divine Mother. Say, Mother, will you hold them? Will you bless them? Will you bring harmony into this family? You know, sometimes people think prayers just fall on deaf ears, but it's not the case. So I hope that was helpful, Richard. That was a beautiful question.
That was super helpful, Craig. And just real quick, is there anywhere in Sri Aurobindo's work where he talks a little more about this specifically that you could point to?
Yeah, the problem with Aurobindo's works is it's so dense, it's so thick, and oftentimes when people read it, you know, they have a sense that it's so intellectual. But if you visit the Aurobindo ashram, if you visit his Mahasamadhi, which is like where his body is, his tomb, I guess, you walk into the area where his tomb is, and it is so overwhelmed with love. Like the air is just so overwhelmingly, just ecstatically blissful and loving and compassionate. His presence was all love. But he was trained at Oxford, and he was probably one of the smartest people who ever lived. So his writing is super dense. He does have a book that's just called The Mother. So that's a good one. You might check out. Integral Yoga is another good one that I liked. There was one that was written by one of so they use the word mother a little bit confusing at the ashram. So there was Aurobindo, and then there was his teaching partner, whose name was Mira Alfonso, and she was also referred to as the mother. But then there's the mother, who's the Divine Mother, and basically they saw the mother Mira Alfonso as a physical incarnation of the Divine Mother. But if you look, if you just dig into his work a little bit, you know, try the book The Mother and see what comes forward there. But it is, and one of the complaints that most people have about his work is it's so intellectually dense that most people miss the love that's in it. That's in it. He writes all day long about Mother as this evolutionary force that's constantly evolving us. And the great book for that is by Sat Prim, who was the mother's disciple. And he was a Frenchman. And he wrote this book called Adventures in Consciousness, which was, I thought, was so excellent. So anyways, some great questions there. So I better move along here because I've a lot more questions to get to. I can go on and on. I apologize. Here's a question, I believe from Lynn, about Kundalini. She writes, Craig, Kundalini was stuck in my hips and my calves. After a Wednesday meditation with you and a Reiki session, I felt much less pressure in my hips and my calves. This relief has lasted for about 2 months. If I get more Reiki, am I losing anything or giving up the opportunity to awaken using Kundalini? No, Lynn. Reiki and Kundalini go great together, so that's not like you're doing something wrong. If Reiki helps release Kundalini blocks, is that a good thing? Yes, that's a great thing. I've heard that Kundalini helps one to awaken, but is it but is that true if I use Reiki to release the blocks? I want to awaken. Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course, Lynn. I want you to imagine that blocks are just mental and emotional baggage. And so, say, for example, again, I'm just going to use the example of me being the abusive, the abusive dad. I like using that one as an example, just to humble myself a little bit here. If I get really angry at my kids, what happens is I create a contraction around my heart, probably my throat, and probably my belly. And if I use Reiki in those areas, basically I'm sending love to my throat, my heart, and my belly. And when you send love through Reiki to one of the chakra centers, the chakras open, they relax, and then the kundalini is able to flow more fluidly through your nervous system, through your body, which will lead to a greater experience of awakened consciousness. So anything you do, Lynn, to release blocks is good for spiritual awakening. So let me be clear about that. Whether it's massage, body work, Reiki, you're not messing the process up. Okay, if you're doing anything healing, that's in total alignment with Kundalini. Kundalini is a force of healing, but sometimes it comes with a lot of pressure, and it needs some support. It needs you to, I'll use this word, cooperate, to work with it. And that's what Kundalini is inviting. Kundalini basically is the divine mother in matter waking up, and so it's rising up, as opposed to the divine mother in heaven waking up and coming down. And so in Aurobindo's lineage, he used the Star of David, similar to how the Jewish traditions use, which is the energy of earth waking up and had it, going up to heaven, and then the energy of heaven waking up and coming down into earth and meeting in the form of you and I. So, Lynn, anything you do to relax your body and heal is a wonderful, perfect thing. So please, yes, more of this. The only time it gets weird is if we're doing in a very controlling way, moving energy around with Reiki, and we get all neurotic about it, and we're doing it 24/7. The big thing is just relax, let go, and if you have a blockage that's persistent, yeah, do a little psychic surgery with some Reiki or body work or massage or somatic therapy, or session with me or whatever, session with someone, anyone helpful. Okay, here's a question from Joan. Hello, I went against a huge spiritual awakening, and now I've been regretting it for the past 2 years. Please help. Joan, I don't know if I understand your English correctly. I went against a huge spiritual awakening, and now I've been regretting it for the past 2 years. I'll just say this, that a lot of people awaken in a, I'll say this, a lot of people find the path of spiritual awakening quite difficult, confusing, painful, messy, overwhelming. If that's the case, Joan, you're doing something right. There's a lot of energy flowing. And so normally when people think of spiritual awakening, they think, I'm sitting on top of a mountain. I'm wearing my Lululemon yoga pants, and I have a cup of tea in my hand and $1 million in the bank account, and everything in my life is perfect. Spiritual awakening is not like that. It tends to be a messy process, a difficult process, a painful process. And a lot of people start to regret it when the pain becomes more intense. But if we're going into regret, that will not help you in any way. The thing that I'm going to invite you to do instead of regret is to relax. As soon as you relax, the pain will move, and then you'll start to experience the positive aspects of spiritual awakening. So if we are regretting stepping on the path and thinking we should go back to the land of, suffering while we are asleep, basically our body is telling us, I'm in a lot of pain, I feel overwhelmed, and it's like a little kid when they get scared. I just want to go home. I want to go home. I've had enough of this. But keep in mind, your true home is in heaven. Your true home is in the land of awakening. Your true home is not to go backwards. You cannot go backwards on the path. It's impossible. You can stall on the path, and regret is a great way to stall. So is guilt, and so is shame. So if you're regretting, guilting, or shaming, you will stall, and you will actually cause yourself more suffering in the long term. And so there's no going back. So Joan, the big thing is, if you're really feeling like you're in a process and it's real messy and difficult, I encourage you to get some support. Again, whether it's one-on-one support with me or one-on-one support with someone local, a teacher, a guide, a healer, a body worker, sometimes just a chiropractor. Sometimes you get your neck cracked and everything seems clear again. But the big thing is, if we're in regret, oftentimes it's because we're in physical pain. So my heart's with you, Joan. My heart's with you. I've been there before. Okay, here's a question. Hi, Craig. Recently, I've been getting pain in my shoulder and neck, and it's blown me away how reactive my nervous system has been. It's like it's triggered it into that exact same state I used to be in all the time, where I feel hyper vigilant and super reactive and super focused on my body, reacting to every little sensation. I'm wondering what you do with so much pain when you had it. Do you just get used to it and become less reactive as you surrender to it? Anything you could say is most helpful. From Aubrey. Aubrey, I'm going to say the same thing I said to the person right before you. If the body is super reactive and hyper vigilant, you need to learn how to self-soothe. You need to learn how to calm your nervous system down. So anything you can do to calm the nervous system down. I know deep breathing sounds cliche, but sometimes if we breathe deeply for 15 minutes, hand on our heart, hand on our belly, we're breathing a sense of I love you and it's okay into our nervous system. You can even imagine that your nervous system is like a teddy bear, and you're just holding it, sending it love, soothing it to sleep. I love you, it's okay. I love you, it's okay. Deep, full belly breaths. If our nervous system is amped up, it means we need to learn to self-soothe, or we need to self-soothe. And in order to self-soothe, I'm not talking one deep breath. I'm speaking about 15 minutes to an hour and a half to 3 hours to all day long. That's how we reset the nervous system. So I don't want you to get used to being amped up. Your natural state is to be peaceful and unreactive. So body work, healing touch, massage therapy, chiropractics, yoga. Sometimes just sitting in child's pose for 15 minutes, doing supported yoga asanas, yin yoga can be real helpful. Watching a silly comedy sometimes can be helpful. Kind of get you out of that mind state. A shower, a bath, a bubble bath, anything like that is going to be really good for you. Okay, so I'm supposed to be done here, but there's just a couple more questions. If everyone could hang in, I'll just see if I can get these. Here's one. I've been almost invisible and neglected on a group of old friends for weird reasons. I feel oversensitive about it to the point of it really brings me down. Is it my ego wanting to be noticed, or a true need to be seen and respected? Yeah, how about both? They've been ignoring me totally. I love them, but I'm frustrated for my own reaction, which is what I need to work on. I go in a downward spiral for hours. Thank you, Craig. Yeah, so the big thing is sometimes in life we are ignored. I found this has been a big part of my spiritual path, is me being ignored. Ever since I was a kid, I was ignored. I was just like the quiet one, and so people ignored me. And so then I had to learn how to speak up and speak my truth and express myself. But if you've fundamentally been ignored your whole life, one of the things you need to do first is you need to stop and see your beauty. So instead of going and saying, everyone in the group is not seeing me, I want you to put that story down, and for you to stop, and for you to see you, for you to see the little girl in you, the little boy in you, the little one in you, and for you to love you and to see that you are the most beautiful person on planet Earth. When you see yourself fully, you will fall in love with yourself. And there's a funny thing that happens in life, because life mirrors our inner world. When you love yourself completely and totally, people will start to love you completely and totally. Most people, not everyone, but most people. And so my whole life I've been ignored, and I ignored myself, and I walked around with this wound saying, I want everyone to see me there. But I realized I was demanding them to do my work. I was demanding the outward world do the work that I was unwilling to do. But when I learned to love myself fully and completely, the funny thing is then the outward world started seeing me. Now I'm so busy, I can't even respond to friends' text, when people call me or message me, or because I'm just so overwhelmed with, all the meetings that people want to have. A lot of times I get in trouble because my friends are saying, Greg, you ignore me. I just don't have enough time to get back to everyone. And I was always the one who was ignored. And so I encourage you to play with this. Is everyone okay if Tim has a quick question here? Is that, Don, we're out of time? Okay, yeah, we're out of time. Yeah, so we'll Tim, bring your question next week, and I apologize to everyone for going over. And I hope you all have a wonderful night, and I'll see you all next week. Bye for now.